my submission for the ETH Global Bangkok Hackathon. To get started, Latasha is the musician who had the vision to fork this for any creator to be able to document their process, their creative process. And so the goal of this is a feed for designers, artists, and other builders to document their creative process on-chain. This is the first video in a set of at least 3 that is going to document this hackathon and my process of building this, so that if you want to follow along and build your own version, the goal is for this to be entry-level technical, so that if you are a musician or if you're a designer and you want to build your own, we're going to try to keep this high level, and I'm going to show you the exact steps that I follow so you can build your own. This video 1, we're going to be setting up the basic collection feed. It's going to start with Onchain Kit, and then we'll go into adding the Zora SDK, and then we'll add in, I didn't open up this tab, but then we'll add in Privy for logging in with email, because the goal is to make this a page that Latasha can invite non-on-chain people and bring them on-chain by allowing them to use email sign-ins so they can set up a wallet on the fly without having to understand what MetaMask is or any sort of seed phrase. So again, Onchain Kit, going to be building on-chain apps on top of Base. Number 2, using the Zora Protocol SDK to display a feed of your in-process. And then 3, we're going to allow people to log in with Privy so that they can sign in with email address and not need to know anything about crypto. Let's get started. Step 1, we'll go into Onchain Kit. Let's go into the docs. We are going to use Next.js. And so we'll just follow their getting started instructions by running npm create next app. If you're a designer, this might be the first time you're using a terminal. If you're on a Mac, you're just going to do command space, and then you'll type in terminal, and that'll open up a terminal for you. I'm going to set up a folder for ETH Global, and I'll cd into my ETH Global folder. If you have a Mac, you have a terminal installed. If you have Windows, you'll have to figure out your own terminal situation. Now that I've got an ETH Global folder, let's go ahead and set up this project with npm create next app latest. Should ask us for the name of the project, and we'll enter in process. We'll go in_process, all caps. No longer can contain capital letters, so we'll just make it in_process. And then we'll do the default option for everything. Once we do that, we'll install Onchain Kit. I usually use Yarn, and so I'm going to stick with Yarn. Recently, some of my newer projects have been using PNPM and Bun, so I hesitated to want to follow that, but I'm going to stick with what I know and use Yarn. So I'll copy this, and we'll wait for the project to get set up. And while we're waiting for the project to get set up, we can go ahead over to the Coinbase developer platform to get our API key. So we're just following the instructions. So far we haven't had to do any thinking. We're just following a getting started instruction. Go over to our CDB Coinbase developer platform log. From here, I want to create a new project. I'm going to call this in process. There's the settings. Click at it. Change this to in process. Save that name. Okay, now we've got project ID. We've got API keys. And so we should now be ready. Secret API keys, client API keys. Okay. Create an ENV that we'll need to be able to do once we have the project set up. We're still installing. Looks like we now have it, so we should be able to cd into in process. I'm using Cursor. I highly recommend you use Cursor. If you already have Cursor installed, you'll run cursor./ to open up the folder, which is in process. If you don't have Cursor, Cursor is the AI that's going to help us build this. It is what allows us to build without having to have any sort of coding expertise. If you go over to Cursor, you can download it for free, and you can build this app for free on the free tier of Cursor. Now that we've got it, I've already opened of the code base. So let's start using Cursor to just have it explain to me how this code base works. It's going to read all the files in the code base, and then it's going to generate a summary using AI to be able to tell us how it works, how the structure of the app works. And so you can use this AI in Cursor to be able to work with you to understand more while you're building. You can understand as much as you'd like or as little as you'd like. I definitely recommend getting a high-level overview of how your code works so you can understand if it's taking the right steps forward or if it's not. While these AIs are very powerful, they do still need a lot of overwatch from us humans, the creators. So there's a basic Next.js application created using Create Next App with Tailwind and TypeScript. It's got a root structure in it. You can click on it and it'll open up the file that's being referenced. All the main layout components that wraps all the pages inside of this layout file. It implements these fonts of Geist, Mono font, both sans and mono, and then it provides the HTML structure for the language settings and font configurations. We've then got a home page. The home page includes a logo, a getting started instructions, deploy and documentation links in a footer, and then you got style, yada, yada, yada. So if you wanted to explain to you how the code base works, you can ask a question and just use that command enter to search the entire code base so that it can act with a lot of intelligence on all of the files that you're working with. Let's keep going through the Onchain Kit install instructions. We're going to open up the terminal inside of Cursor with Control and then the little asterisk in the top left of your keyboard. Once the terminal gets up and loaded, I'll paste this command in. Paste in the command, yarn add Onchain Kit. This is how we're adding Onchain Kit into our app. From here, we already have our API key and we need to add it inside of an env file. I will just talk through setting it up and then I'll stop the video when I need to create it. You'll click this Create API Key button. Name your key. I'll name it in process, or I'll name it ETH Global Bangkok. And then I'll create and download the key and I'll add it into my env file. Let's go ahead and just do the whole thing. Set download. Okay, so here's the API key info. I'll generate a new one once I share how to do it, but I just want to share the entire process. So it's still fetching over here. Let's create a new file and call it .env.local. It told us we could use .env. I always go with .env.local. The choice is yours, how you want to call it. And it would like us to get the API key and then we'll set this constant. So I'll click copy, paste it, and now let's copy our API key. There's a name and then there's a secret. Your client API key is what it needs. So it doesn't actually need the secret, it just needs my client API key. So let's copy that. And because we don't need the secret one and I just shared this, I'm going to go ahead and delete it. Just to make sure I'm not exposing any secrets. Go back to the client one. This one's allowed to be shared. Copy it, paste it, save it, close that file, close that file. What's next? Add the providers. Are we still installing? There's a network error, it looks like. So it's going to try to reinstall. I'm just going to cancel it and try it again. Let's keep our focus on it for a second and see if that helps. Okay, now that we got Onchain Kit installed, let's keep rolling through with the next step. We've added in our environment variables. Now, create a providers.tsx file, add Onchain Kit provider as a child of WAGMI provider, and query client provider. Inside the WAGMI provider, I don't know what this is asking, so let's go ahead and just take this. Let's do Command L, let's paste it, and say Command Enter to search the whole code base and do what it's telling us to do. Again, this is targeted at people who don't have coding experience, so this should be at an easy enough level. So anything in the getting started instructions that you don't understand, you can just open up the side tab, paste in whatever part of the instructions it's talking about, and then it should tell you exactly what you need to modify. First, let's create the WAGMI configuration file. We'll add this. I'll make a new folder called lib. And inside of lib, I'll make a new folder called WAG. And we're just going to make this one called new file config.ts. Here, and now I'll click apply. It's putting it in a different file than the one that I'd wanted, but I'll just cut and put it in this file, and now I'll delete this file, or that folder. Move it. Save our changes. We've imported base. We've got our create config. Now let's create the providers. Okay, so we'll go into a new folder. We'll call it providers. And inside of here, I guess we'll just call this one providers. New file, providers with a capital P, providers.tsx. And now let's apply it. It's doing it again where it's creating a new file. So we will put it in the file that we want. Let's delete this. Delete it. Onchain Kit provider. It's missing. It says it's missing children, but it looks like it's being passed children. Okay, so here's what it looks like it wants us to do in WAGMI. So let's query client provider, Onchain Kit provider. Okay, it's complaining about an error that it's missing. Property chain is missing. Okay. So let's follow its instructions and add in that info. Add in base, which should be imported from WAGMI chains. And our config's not being imported correctly, so let's import config from our lib. No more errors on either of our two pages that we've already created. Going back over here, let's just compare them. Wrap with your providers. Okay, so now we just need to wrap our app with our providers. I'm missing this connectors where it's prompting to only do Smart Wallet. For now, I'm not going to enforce that, and let's just keep progressing forward. Next step is we want to wrap our app with providers. Again, let's just copy the instruction, open up our chat, paste it in, do Command Enter so that it does the work for us. I'll help you wrap your app with the providers component. Based on your code base, you'll need to modify app layout to include your providers wrapper. Here's how you're going to do it. We just click apply. It imports exactly what's needed. It wraps our app with providers. We should now have it all wrapped. Your main changes are we imported the providers, we wrapped the children, and that's going to ensure that all of the app's components have access to WAGMI provider, query client provider, and Onchain Kit provider. So at this point, let's add our styles. We'll do the same thing. We'll copy the top part and see what it says. So we'll Command L, paste it in, Command Enter. We should not have to do much thinking. We're just following step by step what it's telling us to do. Click on the layout. We already have layout open. Click apply. It imports the CSS. That's the only change. Just importing that file will save the changes. Looks like we should be good now. So now let's see if we're good by running yarn dev. Should spin up our local dev server. And as long as the dev server runs okay, we can view it and work on adding Zora. Let's go to localhost 3000. Localhost 3000 is a normal dev environment. You can see it right there, and if you want to open it directly, you can just command click, and it'll open it up inside of your browser. This will be the app running locally. So we can work on it on our computer, on our laptop, and then whenever it's ready, we can deploy it up onto a public link that we can share with our friends. It's important to know that the work you're doing here on your computer, you cannot share with your friends. It's only on your local machine. That's why we call it local. When you deploy it and you host it on the cloud, that's when you get a link that you can share with your friends. Here's our empty app. I think we have now started with Onchain Kit. Let's verify by trying to use one of the Onchain Kit components. Let's go into their docs, and let's try using the wallet component. So we'll click on, actually let's just do identity. I wonder what, yeah, let's try identity. We'll start with that. So it says we can use it like this. And we'll open up our chat, add the, actually, we should be able to use the docs. So let's copy this and let's say at docs, and let's add a new doc and then paste in the link to this doc, and we'll call it Onchain Kit. Confirm. And now that we have Onchain Kit, add the Onchain Kit, add the Onchain Kit identity components to my app. Command enter to do a global search. Let's see if it can just automatically read the docs so we don't even have to copy and paste. Just tag it. Good, it'll just modify the normal page. Click on page, it opens up our page. It's blind apply. Apply to the entire file. Looks like it added in our identity components. It imported everything it needed. Let's accept it and see if it did it right. Let's go back over to our app. Make sure it re-renders properly. Refresh. Create context is not a function. This is usually a sign that we're trying to use a component on the server side that we need to use on the client side. And so in this case, I know this error. This is probably where a lot of you would get stuck. If you see this error, we now have a fix for it. It looks like it's loading in the ENS, it's loaded in their avatar, and now we have an identity component that is already inside of this app. Let's clean up some of the other stuff, and then we can start getting this set up and deployed. I actually don't have that in this section, so we'll keep moving with it locally before we go into the deployment. So I'll delete the Next.js default code. And so now let's delete some of the other old components. We no longer need the deploy now or read our docs. So let's deploy now and read our docs. Let's just get rid of everything in main. But we'll keep the main tag. I'll delete everything inside of it, but I'll keep the outlying tags just so that we can still leverage the normal HTML tags and the structure that they gave us in this create next app. Oh, I deleted my identity component, which is where? Did I delete the identity? Where's the identity? There's my identity, that's what I want. Everything else I want to delete. Delete all that, paste the identity, save the identity. Now we should just have an identity on the screen, and we do. We just got an identity, all the components. Awesome. Okay. And let's also delete the footer because we don't need that either. Let's just delete the entire footer. I think now we've got an empty website with Onchain Kit. Step one done, we've got Onchain Kit. I'll go ahead and stop that, and now let's move on to the next step. Step two, we're moving on to Zora. So now we've got Onchain Kit from Base. We set it up with the Coinbase developer platform. Now we're going to add in Zora protocol SDKs to be able to visualize a feed. If you're not familiar with Zora, Zora is the best protocol for putting art on chain, the best way to distribute art and for creators to get paid for the art that they create. And so that's what we're going to be using. It allows us to be able to build and to keep Latasha's art and any creator's art sovereign, but it also allows them to get the best distribution you can to encounter funds across the art world on Zora and OpenSea, as well as on the financial world on Uniswap and the meme coin markets that exist over there. The part of this SDK that we're going to want to use, I think, is the tokens. And so I think we want a collector client, and we want to get tokens of contracts. Both on-chain and pre-mint tokens can be retrieved using the create collector client, get tokens of contract, and passing a token contract address. The function will return the tokens array for an item for each token in the contract. Each item in tokens contains the information, the token on the token object. contains information in the token in the token object. I think that is grammatically incorrect. It has a function pre-pair-mint. The prepare-mint function takes a quantity and a mint and returns the transaction parameters to mint the token, cost to mint the token, and any necessary ERC20 approvals that must be executed. This is exactly what we want. So we want to use the get tokens of contract to display them on the screen. Let's actually close out of that. We don't need CapCut. So going into cursor, let's now say, I think I've already imported Zora. Let's see if I already have Zora. I already have the Zora creator client. I have not indexed the Zora collector client. So let me collector client. If I click on that, it's not taking it. So I'll just tag this individual page. And let's say, please use get tokens of contract, get tokens of contract from @web. Oops. Let's just go from there. Please use get tokens to display all tokens on my collection. And so now I need a collection that I want it to display. Let's create a collection that we want it to display. So we'll go over to testnet.zora.co. Normally on mainnet you'll go to just zora.co, but I want to do this on Base Sepolia testnet so that I can create tokens that are testing and it doesn't get mixed in with my main brand. Because I also publish art, and I'll publish like this video will get published on Zora, and I'll post this on Base mainnet. But for now, when I'm testing in my apps, I'll create these tokens on Base Sepolia so that I can create a bunch of nouns and other things and use them within my app and not worry about my collectors getting confused or mixing my real art with the things I'm doing for development purposes. Click the plus button. And once we are on the create screen, we'll create a brand new collection. I'm just going to make it of nounish stuff, so we'll go to nouns.wtf to get some media. Choose collection, create new collection. This will be called in process. And let's get our first noun. Save image. We've got a noun. Nouns are CC0, which means that we can use them without permission and for free. So we'll change this drop down to Base Sepolia. Once it finishes uploading, we'll click save, and then we'll upload that same image as our first token in the collection. And process hello world. We'll post this on Base Sepolia testnet. And once this finishes, hope I'm on my right account. I'm not. Let me swap over to my correct account. MetaMask has been having issues. If I'm not signed into the correct account, it just fails the transaction totally. Let's post. Prompts me to sign the transaction. If we sign the transaction, we're calling the create contract method on Zora's factory. And now we have created a test collection that we can use inside of our app. And the reason I wanted to do this first is so that I can just give the link to Cursor so that Cursor can build it around the collection I already know. Let's see if Cursor's smart enough to get it to work. So far, Cursor's been leading us down the right paths. We've been asking questions that have allowed it to lead us down the path we want to be led down. And let's see if we can continue that pattern. I don't need this terminal open, so I'll just move it down into my lower section. And then there's my collection. I'm doing command enter so that we can do a global search on this so that it can just take into account more files. I have a feeling it's going to write the change directly to the home page. I'm going to end up creating a new component for this. Cool, it's telling us to install the SDK. Even though I didn't tell it to, it knows that we still need to install it. So we'll crash our server with Control-C, and then I will say yarn add, and then I'll just copy the package name. It'll install the package. And now it's going to tell us to update the page. I'll update the page and then I'll split it into a smaller component later. We'll make it right make it work, make it right, make it fast. Start with make it work, so we'll just blind follow to make sure that we're making it work. Start the server again with yarn dev, and we should already be on our page. Click apply. So it's telling us we want to use the get tokens of contract method. We want to use effect and use state. We're going to define some token interface for some reason. And then we're using state, we're setting our tokens, we're loading our tokens. We have a use effect to fetch the tokens on the contract. It's using the contract that I passed in. Transport network information, that's not the correct chain ID, but that's okay. It looks like cursor knows that we want to use a different chain. It's still not getting the correct chain, so we'll change it to base Sepolia. We'll save it as that for now. Contract address, network information. This looks good. Loading tokens, and then we display the tokens. Let's accept the changes and see if it works right out of the box. Okay, it's saying that the import is not correct. It looks like we should be creating a collector client. So this part was not correct. We should be importing create collector client from Zora. And then we need to implement this code to call the get tokens of contract, get tokens of contract. So it did not properly implement that step. I'm not going to do a global search this time. We're just going to paste in the code. This is the code I want you to implement. Please add it. Let's apply the changes again to the entire file. And now you can see as we start to blind follow, the file gets larger and larger, and it gets harder and harder to follow what's going on in particular because everything just sits inside of one massive page. And so the next thing I'm going to want to do is start to break this down into smaller files. It makes it easier for the AI to parse and find a specific library that it needs. So it helps the AI, and it also helps the human. It helps the human by having single files that do one thing that are much easier to read and connect together, as opposed to a monolithic file that can just be overwhelming with information and not really understanding logically how it flows together. So we'll blind accept it all. We're still just blind accepting. Use chain ID is not being imported. Yeah, this should be outside of our use effect. This should also be outside of our use effect. Let's fix this in AI to see what it says is the problem. It looks like we just need to verify that it is not invalid. Fine with that. Let's do this check before we even call the function. It's fine here. It's fine here. It looks like it might be parsing the response object incorrectly. So let's apply the changes that it's suggesting. It looks like it knows mintable return is the return value. So let's see if we can find what mintable return is. I'm doing a global search for it. I don't see it. Can I search it over here in the Zora docs? Mintable return. We can click on it here. Can I just go colon mintable return? I can. Okay. And we know that mintable, so it's setting, it wants a token ID and a token URI, so let's see how we can convert it. Token is a, let's open this up, is a secondary, which then has on-chain sale info, so it has a sales config. So I think we want to go, actually let's see if we can just trace it out. Dot, I want token ID. What else do I have? So we got item dot token dot contract dot. How do we get the ID from this? We want the token. The power's out. Sale config. Does it not give us an ID of the token? try just token ID. You know what? Before we try to set any tokens, let's just log what it is. I'm having trouble reading what this is, so let's just console.log token data. Let's save this. Let's see what's going on. Are we doing anything productive at this point? And then I'll need to pause the video and find some power. We're on adding the Zora SDK, and we're currently trying to log with the console. So we should add chain ID and public client into here. It's saying that it's compiled. I don't know if it's actually hot refreshing over here, so let's try to refresh. It says loading tokens. Still not seeing any. Oh, did we get some tokens? We got some tokens. Token 0 and token 1. Excellent. And there's the token ID. Okay. So now let's go ahead and uncomment this. And so we're mapping over the tokens, and we want to set a token ID. I mean, is there a reason we don't just set tokens to tokens? I think we should just set tokens to token data. Token data is an array. Let's just set it to that. It's not overcomplicated. And so now, instead of using token, this should be of type mintable return, right? Yeah, it's a mintable return array. So this should be mintable return array. And now where tokens being used, fine. Okay, tokens now does not have a token ID, but we should be able to go token.token ID. And that should be fine. I know it's going to complain about it, but token.token ID is a thing, even though it says it's not here. And then, yes, let's see if that works. There we go. We've got token ID 1 and token ID 2. And now let's make sure that we can render the metadata for each of those tokens, which is inside of token URI. Token URI, let's just display it on the screen first. And now that we've displayed it on the screen, we'll do Command L. Please display, this is the last thing I'm going to add before we start subtracting and refining what we currently have. It's a constant process in building of expanding and then refining. It's like breathing. You inhale and add more, you process it, and then you breathe out and decompress. And so we've been expanding so far. After this step, we'll compress. Please display the IPFS. Please create a function to convert the IPFS : //CID hash into an HTTP URL with the following gateway. So I've got a gateway I like to use on this decentralized content thingy-mabobber, and then I'll delete the, it's not going to let me just delete some characters. So I want to delete everything that comes ipfs.decentralized-content.com /IPFS. Gateway, paste it. Please create a function CID from token.token.token URI. I think I gave it everything it needs. I'll help you create a function to convert it, convert IPFS to HTTPS, and then it'll return that converted URL. And now it should display the correct URL on the app. Cool. Now let's ask it to please create another function called get token metadata, which accepts the IPFS, which accepts, let me just copy what I want, which accepts token URI and returns the JSON by fetching the URL returned by this function. Getting a little bit more complex here. I definitely know that I have knowledge that a lot of you might not, but right now, if you don't understand, follow along. Sometimes just seeing it done or running through the process without even understanding it can help you to start putting in the reps to gain greater understanding. Just by going through the motions, you can start to have an understanding even if you don't understand what you're doing at first. Let's see what this function is going to do. So now we're setting token metadata, which is going to just be one record. I don't like where we're going to. I think we want to represent an individual token before we get the metadata. So I'm going to reject this step, and let's now create a token component. Now we have a real reason to create a token component, which is we don't want everything to be in an array or to have one value. That's going to be a lot of state management for one component. We want to create a single token that token component can maintain the state for that specific token. In order to do that, we'll create a components folder where we'll put all of our components. New folder, components. And inside of here, we'll make another folder called token. And inside of token, I'm going to make two files, a token.tsx const. As we start typing token, it should auto-complete it for us. And now I'm going to make another file in here called index.tsx. And inside of here, we'll import token, export token. Let's export default token. And now on our page, let's take this token, cut it out, X, and now let's import a token with the token being passed. Ensure, add in that key, that all sounds great. And let's put a token here. And that lib to convert is no longer being used there, so let's first move it over here. Eventually I'm going to want to move this lib into its own lib file, but for now, keep it simple, one step at a time. Token is meant to return. It doesn't like I don't know what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to fix that error, but I don't know much about TypeScript. So we'll keep that error as is for now. We have imported our token. It's complaining about the same thing. Let's see if this works. We've done a fast refresh. Let's do a full refresh. Loading tokens. We still see our token, so we have successfully done it. Let's now go into our token and let's ask the same prompt again. So now we'll just enter here. This time we're only searching inside of our token component, so the context is different. It's got a much smaller context, and so it has a much greater likelihood of helping us out. Let's apply. It's doing it on the wrong page. Let's reject this. Save the changes. I don't think I saved my changes from before. I'm going to close this and I'm going to close the others. Let's run this query. At token. Looks like our page is still loading. Let's apply. Apply to the entire file. We've got metadata, get token metadata, fetch the metadata, and now we're not doing anything with it, but we are at least getting it, so let's accept. let's see if this works by just console logging metadata. And let's see if we get the metadata. Looks like we're already loading metadata. I don't know if this is correct at all, but let's display at least what it's doing. We've got a name, a description. It's got a canvas URL, which is interesting. We're expecting a name, description, and an image. We also have content with a MIME and a URI. So we have content, which is an object of a MIME, which is a string, and a URI, which is a string. And then there's also a canvas URL. Canvas underscore URL, which is also a type string. And let's try to now there we go. Get token metadata. We can move get token metadata inside of this use effect, I believe. And now we fixed some of the errors. Please display the token name and description. All right. All that we're doing now is adding in the ability to read that info, save it. We've now got a name and a description. None of them have a description, so I'll go ahead and delete description. We'll save this. Add the image. Now we'll tell it to add the image. Apply. And now we are seeing the images. So we now have a feed of tokens from a collection. This is not my collection though, so although we do have a feed, let's get it updated to the collection I wanted it to be. We'll go back to page, and public client is using public client. Let's pass in a chain ID here. Chain ID of base Sepolia.id. And it doesn't know base Sepolia, so we need to import base Sepolia from Wagmi chains. Does that change anything when we use base Sepolia? Nothing so far. Might have just broken it. Chain ID is base Sepolia.id, and public client. Chain ID is coming from use chain ID right now, which I don't know if that's actually what I want. Let's use base Sepolia. Actually, I know what's going on. Our chain is defined as base in the config. So if we go into our Wagmi config, we've only got base defined here. So let's actually, for now, make it base Sepolia. Just to keep it simple, we're gonna be just operating everything on testnet right now. Here is our in-process hello world. We have one token on it. This is exactly what I was expecting. So now we've got a feed. And so what should happen if we want to create another one? So let's go back to the previous day's token. Let's save this image. And now let's create a new token on it. So we'll go back over to Zora, we'll click the plus button. Choose a collection. Where is my in-process collection? Create a lot. There it is. Select our file. We got the new download. Upload it. expand the feed. Sign the transaction. And now that that's been created, we should be able to just go back locally, refresh the page, and now our feed should have 2 tokens in it so that we can show both of our tokens. The only thing I'm going to want to switch now is in our feed, I think we want the latest content at the top of the feed, and then we can scroll back in time. So let's go back to page, and let's say switch the order of the items in tokens array. Instead of switch, we'll just say reverse, because that's an actual function in JavaScript. Click apply. Should be a super simple JavaScript change. It's just that one line. Click yes. Save it. Now this time we should see token number 2 at the top, and then token number 1 underneath it. Token number 2, token number 1. So now we're scrolling back in time. We start with our latest, then we scroll back. I don't like seeing the Nick prints up here, so let's go ahead and swap this out to Latasha. So let's go over to zora.co/Latasha. We'll just go to zora.co first, and then look up Latasha in the search bar. And then all we need to do is click the drop down, copy her address, and put her address in this identities section. I don't know what these schema IDs are. We should now see call me latasha.base.e. Looks like she does not have a PFP in here, but we're at least picking up her info. And now we've got the feed. So that's number 2. Step 1, add Onchain Kit. Step 2, add the Zora SDK. Step 3, let's add in Privy login. Do we need to add Privy login in this video? I think the goal of this video was to get the readable feed. We have a read feed using Base and Zora. Base is the network that we're publishing on, and Zora is the protocol that we're using to publish our art. And I think we'll stop there, because now any musician can create a collection on Zora, and then if you want to build your own website to display that collection, you can now create a feed of your collection, and it took us less than an hour to build the whole thing. Use Cursor, follow this video step by step, and in less than an hour, you'll be able to have your own feed to display your collections on Base, Zora, and any other network on the superchain, all using the Zora protocol to display your art on your own sovereign website. If you've got questions, leave them in the comments, and if I don't respond to them, someone else might come through and respond. Please click any of the buttons, whether it's the mint button if you're looking at this on Zora, or the subscribe button or the like button if you're watching this on YouTube. A little support goes a long way. Thank you for your time. This is Sweets, signing off.